You're listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, hosted by Stanfield Gray and John Yarian.
Greetings and welcome to Southpod. I'm John Yarian, your host, and we are recording today from the Dig South Conference. We're at the thing itself in sunny Charleston, South Carolina, and I am pleased to be joined by Jason Williamson. How are you?
I'm good.
And Jason, before we get into all kinds of interesting stuff, I've got to understand your title. And folks, it's a good one. Just brace yourselves. He is the Vice President of Startup Ecosystem for Oracle.
Right.
Okay, so we all know Oracle. That's a huge brand. We know
what those words mean individually, but together
you put them all together,
right?
It sounds like you're governing some sort of a galaxy system.
That's my aspiration.
Break it down for us. What do you do?
Right. So, kind of what this phrase of words means really is what we're trying to accomplish. And so I'll take a step back and talk about why we even care about startups, because that's sometimes a big question that we have. Like, Oracle, you do startups? Does that mean you invest in them and all that? And so, people's preconceived notions about it are usually wrong. So I'm glad you asked that question. So we are truly trying to build an ecosystem for the builder community. And that does mean trying to identify companies that are at the seed stage all the way up towards well-funded A, B, and C round. And then the things that would orbit that. So I guess it is a galaxy a little bit. So the venture capital community, these kinds of festivals, local accelerators, all of that. So our goal really is twofold with our ecosystem program. And it's probably worth mentioning that we have a residential component where startups will apply and come in for a 6-month cohort to one of 8 different cities.
Residential meaning?
Yes, like you come and work in our space.
Like you literally move in.
You literally move in, right? So we are from Tel Aviv to Singapore for that. And which was really successful in our first year, and we thought, well, how do we reach more people? Let's cast a wider net. And that's when we started our non-residential program, or what we would call the scale up, so that we can really reach startups all over the place, no matter where you live. And so that's kind of what ecosystem means for us.
Well, let me make one parenthetical observation. I love your title because I think it would be incredibly hard to know if you're doing a bad job at it.
That's how I like to do things.
I love that.
Right.
A lot of
Super
fluidity
fuzzy,
in there.
Right,
No, guys,
right.
It's the nature of the ecosystem.
Right. Don't ask too many questions. Right.
Well, but let's get to the why here, though, because I love conceptually where you're going with this, but part of me is saying, oh, this is just really elaborate prospecting for companies to acquire. This is a really long game.
Right.
They're just looking to find people earlier on and just eat them up and bring them into the mothership. Is that close to it?
It's exactly opposite of that.
Really?
So a lot of people assume this is a part of our venture arm.
Yeah.
We have no venture arm. So we're one of the few big corporates that don't do corporate ventures. Like, we just don't do that.
Okay.
We also take no equity in the companies we do because we don't have a venture arm. The second thing is we are absolutely not an M&A function. We're really truly about finding these startups and creating what I like to call like a virtuous cycle. So because then people are like, well, then what's in it for Oracle, right? You're not all, you're talking about altruism a lot here. That doesn't sound normally what I would expect you to be talking about. So for me, if we can identify a really cool startup and help them with technology and build cool stuff, and oh, by the way, we have this cool cloud, like that's a part of this evangelism, right? And then they start doing interesting things, then what I want to do is give them exposure to our 400,000 customers around the world. And that's the differentiator for us. That's why people are applying. So they're like, wow, I want to increase my revenue. If you can walk me in the door of a CIO of XYZ company, then shoot, that's a great thing. So the goodness for us is if we can help accelerate their sales, they have to scale. If they're going to scale, then they're going to scale on our technology. Yeah. And so we get this virtuous cycle of, help them sell, they get the deal, and then grow in circle.
Well, this may be a poor example, but Boeing, for example, is not in the rubber tire business. They do need to land planes.
Sure.
It's in their best interest to foster relationships that in some cases are very symbiotic
Sure.
and a little blurry,
Right.
that serve both parties but don't look like an acquisition.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
It keeps people in planes and keeps the planes landing. They're still
Absolutely.
not in the tire business. Is
Right.
that fair? Is that in the neighborhood?
It's fair, right? Like we want to put people on our infrastructure cloud. We want to help people do data-heavy things, right? Data has gravity, and that's a good thing. And so we want people to build things on our platforms and analyze and do artificial intelligence and things like that. And so if we can help find companies and foster that, then we all win.
Yeah. Well, let's now that we have a sense of what you're up to, I want to pause and create a space and learn a little bit more about you as a person.
Right.
I imagine as a young child you thought someday,
Yeah.
if I work hard enough, I will be in charge of a startup ecosystem. Has that been your vision your whole life?
Well, it started at the age of 3. My mom she would write that on the wall. Yeah, no, it's actually funny. I kind of did know I wanted to do this my whole life in a weird
Stop
way.
it.
In a weird way.
That's a preposterous claim.
Here's why.
Stop it.
Here's why. I remember when I was 15 years old, I had this like epiphany, and I was just lucky to kind of, I know what I'm going to do with my life, and this is going to sound a little bit dramatic, but
I'm with you.
right.
We're
So
here.
I was 15 years old. This was in the 80s. So it was before the wall fell. So there was still like communism running around Eastern Europe. And so I was on a church mission trip, and it was like these 3-month things. So I was there for 3 months, and it was really exciting.
So this is not like the fly out for a week, paint a building, fly back, kind of like
this was
hand
like
wave. This was
we were like working
real.
with like secretive underground churches in the Soviet Union and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
And so we were also doing some work with some like populations there that don't have a lot. And I was just sitting there in this Eastern European country with lots of resources, and I was really impacted by the fact that like, man, these people are in poverty, not because of lack of resources, but because of like, a gap or a depravity in the influencer level. So like, I want to influence influencers. That's what I'm going to do. So we've got lots of efforts that meet the needs of the poor, and that's good, and we got to keep doing that, and we got to support that. But what if we could change hearts and minds at people who are employing, and they did business with equity and without corruption? These people might not be living this way. So I'm going to pursue a life of entrepreneurship so that I can influence influencers. So every career decision I made was always around like, am I helping influence influencers in what I do? That's why I was drawn to be a professor at Virginia, which I did for a while. I've had my own startups, and now this is another opportunity. Like, obviously, I'm not overtly saying, hey, startup, go be moral, right? But you have this opportunity to say, and this is a new age, I believe, from probably when you and I were growing up, where people who are starting companies have a passion for doing good as well.
Right.
And so if we can also activate that, that like I get to check my 15-year-old box for my life dream. So yeah, I kind of did. Now I didn't, my.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here.
Sure.
So
Sorry.
No.
You
this
asked
is good.
me.
And I wanted the answer. This is good. And what I'm hearing, and you've heard the saying or the proverb that if you see a baby in a basket floating down a river, you immediately rescue it. If you see two, go upriver. See what's happening.
Right.
And it sounds like you had a desire to go upriver.
Right.
That was driving you as, okay, I can fix this or Band-Aid that, but I'm interested in systemic change.
Yes, and to go off this thread of proverbs, we've heard give a guy a fish and eat it for a day and then teach him. I was like, no, let's teach him how to own the pond. Right? And so like that's what drives and motivates me personally, and why this is cool to do. Yeah,
well, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but we're in a moment of sincerity. I mean, in the functional capacity of your job, do you self-identify as somebody who's doing good? This is a good act? This is creating opportunity? Does it feel that way to you?
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. In fact, I was having a conversation with an investor in the ecosystem in Brazil recently, and they were talking about a fund that they were putting together to do impact investing. And is that something that we can help identify startups to do so that there's social change attached to the startup. So like we could do good there, right? That doesn't mean everything, we don't have a thesis of identifying those, but we are connecting really well with companies like that. So there is that aspect. So like, this is like, I think when one can have an identity that's beyond their particular job, then that's going to bring significance to your job.
And I think that's where good judgment comes from, right? Because it's not situational, it's directional, right? There's something you're doing here that's not merely case by case.
Right.
And we were being glib earlier about ecosystem. It's fun to pick on a little bit, but I think it's appropriate in that it speaks to the nature of all these relationships and interconnectedness that make things go and make things work, which is really relevant for us here at Dig South and in a startup environment, that being able to recognize that, to see it in context and not in a vacuum, makes a huge difference. And it sounds like you get to play in that space.
It's so cool. Like, and this is just it's a different time too. Like this idea of open development and open collaboration. It's not the way it was when I was coming up. Like, I rarely hear a startup now saying, "Hey, will you please sign an NDA?" Like, no one says that anymore. First of all, I'm like, why would I do that? Like, right? And it used to be that's what you did. You got to sign the NDA. I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing, and I'm going to solve my problems myself. And now you roll into these places where you have these open co-working spaces where people are actively collaborating together. And I mean, even look at us. Like we're talking to companies building blockchain solutions. Well, we also have a blockchain solution. So like, there's still an opportunity to do good for each other, even though there's maybe some competition going on too.
Well, in the midst of all this positivity we're creating, I imagine there probably are some challenges. Right. And I would assume one of those might be people simply not seeing it the same way, just working out of a context or a thought pattern from 10, 15 years ago that's rooted in competition, that doesn't want you to sign an NDA, that doesn't really understand ecosystem as you do.
Sure.
Do you have a responsibility to evangelize? I mean, do you have to educate, or you just do what you do?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One, I'm finding I'm not having to educate those people that much.
Yeah.
And if so, you just don't have a lot of time for them. Right? It's kind of dealing with I was hearing somebody talk about this the other day with dealing with like racial tension in a community.
Jason just explained some unreturned emails.
Yes.
So if you're trying to get in touch with them, you haven't heard back, you just heard why. Here's the answer.
Well, it's like I heard somebody say the other day, it's like, we're trying to do this thing with some racial reconciliation, and if you don't see it this way, I don't have time for you. Meaning like there's some people that just need to move on.
Yeah.
And I think they'll either succeed, they'll either change or die, one or the other. So well, that doesn't mean we're telling everybody each other's secrets. Like there's value in building cool stuff and waiting, right?
But you bring up an interesting point. Time's a resource, and it's limited.
Yes, indeed.
And even at Oracle, even for you, and I wonder, how do you measure your own activities? How do you gauge? How do we know if this is working? Yeah.
So it's important to note that we come from research and development at Oracle, so I'm not a sales function, I'm not in that, and so that drives a lot of how we're measured and how we think about success. And so for us, it's really about adoption and exposure. So like, are people using, I give out a bunch of free credits, a lot, which a lot of the cloud providers do. And so one way for me to measure, is this working or not, is, are people using our stack? Are we putting people up on stage and talking about their stories? Like, are they adopting and doing cool things with it? And so for us, the revenue is good, it's long tail, it's gonna come, and we're seeing some really cool like internal wins for us. But I think for the general, is this working or not, is just purely in the response and the numbers. So for example, when we started this 2 years ago, really now, it was with a center in Bangalore, India. And then our president, Thomas Kurian, said, hey, we should do a bunch more of these. And he asked my boss to say, hey, let's go do 8 this year. Like 8 accelerators in 1 year, that's crazy. You can't do it.
Ambitious.
Yeah, it's a little ambitious. And do startups ever think about Oracle for cloud? Like, kind of, I don't know. And is anybody going to come? And we had 4,000 companies apply for 40 slots. And so we realized, like, okay, we should keep doing this thing. And are these 4,000 that we need to engage? Like, I don't know, but we're going to try. There's 11 billion was invested in venture capital and startups at various stages around the world. That's a lot of money in a lot of companies. So for us, we could, the pie is really big, and we're going to continue to measure our success on how people are engaging with us and how we can provide value for them and their growth. And what they're adopting. Another win for us is our customers having success. So we had a startup in Brazil. They came into our first cohort in Sao Paulo this year, and about halfway through, and it was like maybe a 4-man company, really small, they closed $500,000 in revenue. It's good when you're 4 people, and that just put them on a stage and a platform that they didn't have before. So for me, that's a win, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Oracle, the brand, is extremely well known. To your point, there's a lot of presuppositions and other stuff that comes with it.
Absolutely.
And again, to your point, startups and early stage concepts don't often think of Oracle
Correct.
in certain ways, and you're in the business of changing that. I sort of reject the idea, as you characterize it, like, we didn't know if anybody would come.
Right.
I sincerely doubt that. I am curious, though. I would imagine that just the response itself is a success metric. 4,000 applicants. You don't have room for all of them, but they all know something different about Oracle.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I wonder how else you might measure that. I mean, the hearts and minds is a tough thing to gauge.
It is.
So I suppose it would literally be numbers like that, or are there other forms of feedback you're soliciting?
So, you just look at traditional metrics. Like I can't tell you what they are right now because I just don't remember. But we're having just huge amounts of press hits.
It's a podcast. You can make it up.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
We're not really bound to the truth here.
We had 8,000 press hits yesterday. No.
I love the attempt at veracity on the podcast. Let me get Your Honor. Let me get it correct.
I just don't. So that's a way. We're just making a lot of noise with not a ton of effort.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We launched this non-residential program in the middle of February at an event in San Francisco, and did a little bit of press release, but didn't do a lot of marketing, didn't do much after that. And we had hundreds and hundreds of applications inside of a few weeks for people who wanted to join this non-residential ethereal program.
Well,
so that's good. That's good.
It's really good, and I just want to briefly have you tell it. What is that? So we know it's non-residential, but
what does that mean?
Do you get a booklet? Are there meetings? What is it?
Right. You get a galactic badge for the. So we have a set of benefits that one would get from being in this program, and it's kind of a mix between technical and business. So when you enroll, you're going to get a chunk of credits. That's kind of table stakes these days for that. But the credits depend on lots of different things, and we have a team that will work with you to figure out what the appropriate level of credits is going to be. So it's going to be based on what you're trying to build now and what you've been doing already and things like that. So that's there. You also have a lot of technical mentorship. So because we come from product, we want to engage with you deeply on that. Not just so that you can understand our stack, but our cloud stack, but a lot of the applications that we have going up, right? So we have a company, Stella.ai. They're an early group. They do a chat bot for applicants going into an applicant pool so that they can kind of work with their companies to find out where am I in the process, and if you're a corporation, you're getting thousands of resumes. How do you go through that? Well, Oracle has an application called Taleo, which manages resumes and hires and things like that, and it's used heavily within industry. So Stella benefited greatly by having connectivity into our product teams to better integrate with that, and so we're helping them on that end. So instantly their revenues are going to go up because now they can serve their clients who have that product better. So technical mentorship, technical access, those are two big areas. And then then there's this notion of revenue growth. So we have a program within this called Customer Connect. So I have a team whose only job it is to help the startups that are kind of ready for prime time to plug into our sales channel. So it's not just a slideware thing where hey, you have access to Oracle's cloud because we'll put you up on a website. It's more than that. So for a lot of companies, we'll bring them into the C-suite if it's appropriate and make those introductions. I'm not going to sell it for you, but I'm going to try to remove as much friction as possible to do that. And then obviously other marketing opportunities like this, or things like South by or Oracle Open World or all these events that are around the world, we're constantly bringing these guys on stage to be able to let them have a voice that they might not have had before. So it's a spectrum. So we go from, they have a lot of benefits technically, and they have a lot of benefits from marketing and enablement. And then I'm really excited about this too. We're about to start an alumni program. So once you've kind of rolled out of this, like you become a paying customer or you've graduated from the 6-month cohort, we still want to care and feed for you, because my idea is like when you're a startup, you're actually going to be peaking years maybe after we get to touch you. So we want to make sure you still have a lifeline back into Oracle to continue to help, to continue to have that connection to product and even an opportunity to accelerate your revenue. So that I'm really, really excited about that. So we're going to be rolling that out pretty soon as well.
So we're having this conversation in Charleston. You work for Oracle.
Yes.
You're doing all this amazing stuff. Obviously, when we finish this conversation, you're going to get on a plane and go back to California.
No,
right?
I'm going to get in a car and drive to North Carolina.
I don't believe it.
That's where I live. So
you're based?
I'm based in the old North States. So
and in the South.
Yes,
so that's really
here.
interesting. Is that where this is supposed to be located? Is just
the
where
center
you
of the ecosystem galaxy is
the
Raleigh,
event
Durham,
horizon
Chapel
of
Hill.
the ecosystem.
Yeah. So nothing could be finer than to be in Carolina.
Is that just where you were? Is that where
That's
they
where I
wanted
live.
you?
So it's part of my story. So I was from Virginia and worked for Capital One. It was pretty cool. And you know how it was in the 90s. You did your run at a bank, and then you decided to go to B school. And actually, in those days, no, you started companies, and so because you could get funding off the back of a napkin, right? So I was fortunate enough to be a part of the IPO at Capital One and got to learn a lot at a really, really fast-moving company. And my wife and I were from Richmond. We actually went to high school together, and she also worked at Capital One. And so instead of going to B school, I kind of got the startup bug. And so I came down to North Carolina about 20 years ago, maybe 18, to do a startup. I was like, single-digit person there, and I really loved it and had an idea through building a home. My wife and I had a custom home, and it was a terrible experience and selective memory, and the builder's losing money, and I'm frustrated, and like, man, we could do better. So I started a CRM SaaS play for residential construction in like 2001. In those days, we called them ASPs, not SaaS.
I was gonna say,
right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my entrance into North Carolina, and we just loved it and just kind of stayed. And so I've done a tour of duty at Amazon, and I've done some startups, and I mentioned at the university, and so I've just managed to stay in the.
Well, you have a faint Virginia accent. It's not strong, but it's there, and I like it. And part of what I like about it, that Virginian tone is kind of like a high Southern accent.
There you go.
It's like a genteel.
Right.
Right. It's almost like in the UK, there's this more proper British, and there's like a Cockney accent.
Correct.
And
right.
Virginia Southern, there's like an air of respectability about it.
That's
I like
right.
That.
That's right.
Do you still think of that as home? Are you back in Virginia often?
For 5 years, I commuted every Monday to the University of Virginia in Charlottesville because I taught there. So as a full-time professor at UVA, I still lived in Raleigh. So our hearts.
So you were a long-haul trucker.
I was a long-haul trucker. Yeah, kind of that.
Okay.
With grading. So the answer is yes to both. My wife and I feel that Virginia and North Carolina are both. Our hearts are deep in both of those places. But I'll tell you what, Raleigh is a great place. And there's an old Southern saying, this may offend some people here.
That's a great start.
But this is a good start.
I can't wait.
So before the Civil War, there was a saying that said, Raleigh was a valley of humility between two mountains of conceit. And that was Charleston and Richmond.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll own that. That's spot
Charleston
on.
and Richmond.
Yeah.
And so it's actually great. I love the startup scene is actually quite good there. I was talking with a VC in the Valley not that long ago, a part of a sovereign fund in Asia, and so he said, my first deal was in Durham. I love the South because people are just real and they're transparent, and like what you get is what you get, what you see is what you get. So we'll stay.
I love it.
So I'm not getting on a plane back to California to go home.
That's a relief. Two more, we'll get you out of here. The first one's kind of a deeper philosophical one. I'm curious, what is the moment for you? So you described a lot of the things that you do.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of shapes, but what is kind of the apex for you in the effectuation of your work where you go, yep, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm in here. Is it seeing a startup gain exposure that completely changes their trajectory? Is it connecting two companies in a way that will really synthesize them? What's the moment that for you is like the reason you do this?
So the philosophical moment for me, I'm a relational human. I just like making connections. And so I think that is the moment for me when I can see the fruition of a startup get connected into one of our customers and they get a win. That's just that's when I get my warm fuzzies because I got to check all the boxes, by the way, the professional box, my boss is happy, but for me, I'm very relational and making those connections is where I'm like, yep, it was a good day.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about residential, non-residential, credits and other stuff.
Correct.
People are listening. How do they get at this or learn more about it?
They can go to oracle.com/startup.
Okay.
And there's the landing page for all of the residential programs and our dates for the cohorts and the pitch days and all of that, as well as links to apply for those and apply for the non-residential program. So there you go.
Great. Jason Williamson, Startup Ecosystem, Oracle, thank you.
Man, thank you. It's great.